Okay, so good evening, everyone, and I'm very happy to see you, and thank you for being here, and thank you for Miriam. Today we're going to talk about this week's Parsha, which is Parshat Matot-Masei, both of them, at least in Eretz Israel. And the topic that opens Parashat Matot is the topic of vows, nedarim. So that's what we want to talk about. And actually, when we're talking about vows, we're really talking about how should we approach, how should we treat the physical world, physicality, with all its different pleasures and enjoyments, and what's the proper holy approach, cognitive, psychological, spiritual approach to physicality. That's really the topic behind the topic of vows, of nedarim. So, but let's start with what is a vow? What does the Torah tell us about vows? And what does halacha tell us about vows? And then we'll go into the Hasidic realm, and then we'll really try and feel what it means to us. So what is a vow? A vow, neder, right, in Hebrew, a vow is when the Torah, let's put it this way, the Torah tells us things that we must do, and it tells us about things that we mustn't do. There are things that are chiyuv, that we have to do them, positive commandments, and there are things that we mustn't do, and we shouldn't touch it. That's negative commandments. And then there's the space in between. And the space in between, that's really the hardest part. The space in between is the space of the permissible, the mutar. Mutar is something that it's up to you. You have to decide. It's up to you. If you want to do it, you can do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't do it. It's not asur, it's not something impure or bad or negative or forbidden in any way, and it's not something that is very holy that you have to do. And it's a whole wide range of, it's all the kosher foods, it's all the spare time, it's all the places that you can travel and go to that you don't have to, but it's not asur, but it's not chiyuv, right? And this is where it gets very confusing, because if you think of your life as a regular human being in the world, then you have no problem with what's permissible. You say, let's go, it's good, let's have fun. Let's have fun. It's okay to have fun. It's wonderful to have fun. But if you're of a religious mindset and you're constantly thinking, or at least you want to be constantly thinking about, what does God want from me? Why did he put me in this world? I need to be a servant of God. I want to be close to him all the time. I want to be his emissary or his messenger in this world. Then it gets very, very confusing. And then you think maybe nothing is permissible to me. And maybe things are permissible, but I shouldn't touch them at all, because then I'm thinking about myself, and I don't want to be thinking about myself. And then you can have moments in which you're just a regular person looking to have fun, and the moments in which you're reminding yourself of the fact that you're a soul with a mission in this world, and so on. So this is where vows come in. Vows are the Torah's way of giving you an option, right? It's not obligatory. Giving you an option to say that you're taking it upon yourself to not touch something in the world, right? There are nedarim, vows, and there are shvuot, oaths. So it's really similar. Vows have to do with objects, and oaths have to do with actions, things, actions that not things, actions, doing certain things. Whereas nedarim, vows, have to do with certain foods, let's say, or certain objects that you don't want to have anything to do with. But for our sake, it's all one thing. Both nedarim and shvuot, vows and oaths, have to do with taking upon myself that certain things that are allowed, I'm going to block myself from them. And why does the Torah need to give us this thing called a neder, a vow or an oath? Why do we need to have this? Simply don't do it. You want to not do something, then don't do it. But it doesn't work this way psychologically. Psychologically, you need something more powerful than yourself to stop you from doing it. You have to have this sort of very dramatic action that you say, I vow this and that. And then you're obligated by this. And in today's world, the best way to imagine this is like telling someone, I want you to block my internet and don't give me the password. Right? That's a vow. That's the best way to imagine a vow. I can't trust myself not to go into the internet at certain times or to certain websites. So I have to hire a company to block me from going into certain sites, or to block me even from using the internet at all. Maybe some people say now for a whole week, I'm taking a week off the internet, so don't tell me the password. And or take that drug away from me, right? Take that drug, whatever it is, away from me. I can't trust myself. A vow is something very similar to this. A vow is when I'm saying something, and the moment I said it, it's so powerful, and I know that it's very holy, and that to break it is a whole thing, then it acts like hiring someone else to guard me. It's a bit like this. Now, so that's the first, just understanding, trying to figure out what is a neder, what is a vow. That's the first thing. Second thing is that, very interestingly, this parsha opens with Matot, starts with the whole idea of a vow. You can have a vow. And then the very next verse starts talking about how to annul the vows. And the Torah talks more about annulling the vows than it talks about the vows. And at least in this parsha, it's very clear. And the image, there are two examples. One is and now we have to understand this also, and it's going to help us down the road. There are two terms in Hebrew for annulling a vow. The first term that the Torah uses is hafara, hefer, lehafer, to annul the vow, right? But there's another word, it's not in the Torah, it's Chazal put it, but we say, we think about it at least every year. In Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur, it's called hatarat nedarim. It also means to annul the vow, or to break the vow in some way, but it's one letter apart. It's hafara and hatara. Hafara is, again, if you translate it, it's the same word. It's to annul the vow, but it's two different things. So hafarat nedarim comes from the Torah, and it goes like this. A daughter is saying a vow, and then the father says, you took upon yourself, but I'm breaking your vow. I'm your authority, and I'm telling you, I don't allow you to. So you did take the vow. We don't ignore the fact that you took it, but it gives the father permission to lehafer, to annul the vow of the daughter. And the same also goes for a husband and wife. It's a bit different. It's not a father and a daughter, but there's also something that, in a way, at least in classical society today, with womanhood rising, it's changing. But the woman, the wife, her husband had more authority over her than we like to think today. But that's how it was. So it's very similar. The wife can take a vow, and then the husband can annul it. So it's the father to the daughter, or let's say a parent figure to the child, and it was also in the context of husband and wife. Anyway, that's hafarat nedarim. Hafarat nedarim says you made the vow, but there are people with authority to break your vow for you. You can't break your own vow, but someone who is more authority than you can break the vow for you. This is hafarat nedarim. And then there's also hatarat nedarim. Hatarat nedarim, which is like, in Hebrew, it's like untying. It's like untying the knot. It's the same verb. Lehatir is to untie the knot. It's something more extreme, and there are a lot of debates about this in halacha. And this says, and this can do either an expert or three people. And we do this before Rosh Hashanah, and which is you stand before three people, or in Chabad it's 10 people, and you say, I ask you to untie, break, retroactively, all the vows that I made, and also ahead, the vows that I'm going to make by mistake later on this year, or that in advance I want you. And the whole idea of Hatarat Nedarim is not that I'm breaking a vow that was made, is that I'm untying it retroactively as if it never happened. This is Hatarat Nedarim. Hatarat Nedarim is you can come to three people or one expert, and he's asking you something like, if you had you known all the consequences of your neder, would you still have made it? And if you say no, because I didn't really realize what I was taking upon myself, that's enough. For okay, it's nullified altogether. It never happened. It's a different thing. So we have the concept of nedarim, vows, which is I'm afraid of my own yetzer, that it's going to pull me in all kinds of directions. I know it's mutar, I know it's permissible, but I'm scared of myself in a way. I'm scared that I'm going to be tempted by all kinds of things, and I want to be even holier than the basic obligations of the Torah, and therefore I'm going to take upon myself not to touch them. And then there are two ways of nullifying it. One is someone with an authority, like a father or a husband, says, I'm just breaking it for you. And then something more extreme, which is to untie it as if it never happened at all. And this is, and regarding the second form of nullification, Chazal said something very interesting and extreme. They said it has no foundation in the written Torah at all. It's completely a chidush of Chazal. And they said, Heiter nedarim, the idea of hatara, or untying as if it never happened, is, and then they used a very interesting expression, and it's going to become more meaningful later on. They said it's porchin ba'avir ve'en lahem al ma she'yismochu. It's flying in the air. The whole concept, the Torah doesn't say anything about this second, more radical form of nullifying the vow, which is called hatara. So Chazal themselves say it has absolutely no foundation in the written Torah. We made it up. It's flying in the air. That's their expression. It's flying in the air. This thing called untying the vow. Okay? So this is just an introduction, just to get all the concepts, right? We have the concept of neder, and then we have these two ways of untying it. Now we're going to get into the main idea. So the main idea, this is coming from a sikha from the Rabbi, sorry again, is the Rabbi is taking three halachot, three laws written by Maimonides, by the Rambam. And he explains what vows are. And then the Rebbe says it's three levels of being, three modes of being, which are really, as I said in the beginning, modes of how to experience the physical world. What should, the energy, the approach, the mindset, how should I feel about the physical world? So let's start with the first level, which is a very low basic level, but we definitely need it. And it's in all of us, but it's only a basic level. The basic level is, and the Rambam says, why did the Torah give us the option of taking vows upon ourselves? Especially as we all know that no one encourages this, right? We read in the Torah that we can take vows, and yet we know the Jewish world, we know the world, and the Torah itself says so. Try and not take vows upon yourself. And up to the point that every time we make a promise, we say, bli neder. I'm not vowing, it's not a vow. Not because I'm really making a promise, but I have to be careful to say bli neder in order to not implicate myself in this complication of having a vow. It's so complicated. And also, like we said, Atarat Nedarim in Rosh Hashanah is all about try, even if by mistake you made a neder, we're going to untie it for you. So the question is, why have it in the Torah in the first place? So the Rambam says this is for people who know that they have a risk of being addicted to something or falling into a certain yetzer, and they need it. And the Torah has to give room for people to recognize that they have an extremely strong pull towards something, and then they need to make their own distance from this. And also they know, even if it's mutar, it's permissible, it's okay, they know that the way they're going to do it, it's going to be bad. And it's going to lead them to forbidden things, or it's going to damage them. And they know, not everyone's like this, but some people are like this. Everyone who got addicted to anything is like this. And many people get addicted to many things. So that's why we need, if you're, let's put it this way, we're going to use this image of drowning and then floating and then, right? So we're just going to start with drowning. People who feel that they're drowning in physicality, in the material world, like at least in some area of it, they really have an attraction to sugar, or they really have an attraction to, kinds of movies or whatever. Then they have the vow. Again, we're not going to take vows now, but there's something like a vow, which means you have to be very careful about this thing, and you have to be very much against it. You have to be against yourself, against the pull that you're feeling, against whatever it is that pulls you in that direction. And it's okay. For example, if you're a Baal Tshuva, and you were in a certain part of the secular world, and you find it very, very attractive to go to whatever it is, bars or clubs or certain movies or whatever it is, and for someone who didn't grow up there, it's not so attractive maybe, but for you it is, and you know that it is. So you need something akin to a vow. You need something that is like a decision. It's not a mitzvah, it's not a halakha, but you're making your own decision. I'm not touching that at all. I'm not going close to that place. I'm not, keep me away from this. And if I go there, you have to pull me away from there. This is like making a vow. And it's okay. It's really okay. Because sometimes when we're drowning in the waters of physicality, of the material world, we need something stronger than just a regular halachic mode of being. We need to be able to take upon ourselves more extreme vows because we know ourselves. And that's why the Torah put this thing called vows. That's why Hashem put this thing called vows in the Torah. But it's not the regular, normal, healthy, rational, middle of the road, normal way of living. That's what Maimonides says. It's okay if you're weak, if you're addicted, if you're tempted to make this kind of hyper extreme decision of distancing yourself from something. But it's only, b'di'evet. It's for particular situations. This is the first level of being, of looking at the physical world. You're very much in the physical world, you're attracted to it, and you need to take extreme measures to make sure you don't drown more, or that you stop drowning at all, that you start raising your head above the water. Just like I'm raising my head above the screen. Second level, Maimonides says, this is not vows, this has to do with Chazal's term called Kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lecha. Sanctify yourself in what is permissible to you. There is the permissible, and you can enjoy it within the limits of reason. Kadesh atzmecha mutar lecha, sanctify yourself, is you don't need, to lock yourself in a room, to lock something in a room and throw away the key. You don't need to have other people, not telling you the password, or you don't need to make extreme decisions that you're not going in the direction of whatever it is that you want to. No, you're in control, you're in charge, you're a rational human being, and you're coming to whatever it is, the physical world, with a kind of balanced way of saying, well, this is okay. Taking a vacation once in a while, it's okay. I'm not getting addicted to it. I'm not going to take 2 days off every week. I'm taking a vacation every once in a while, and you have the reasonable capacity to make reasonable choices, and you don't need vows. And that's why the Torah, immediately after telling us that there is something called a vow, it tells us, but then you can break it also. Right? Verse after verse in this Parsha. Because the Rambam says the whole idea of a vow is for particular extreme situations or people that need it. But that's not the middle path. It's not the sane, normal way that we should live our lives. And that's why we're saying, don't take vows upon yourself. Don't be extreme. Live your life, come to the permissible with care, with, think about it. Think how much you should do it, and do you want this cake or you don't want this cake? If you take the cake, it's not that terrible, and maybe, but don't take too many cakes. That's now the third level is also in Maimonides, but it's in a different place. It's very early on, and the Rebbe says this has to do with something called, which is very Hasidic. It's called Bechol Drachecha Da'ehu. Bechol Drachecha Da'ehu is everything comes from Hashem, both the spirituality and the physicality. And you can serve Hashem in all levels. And this third level is something that is not just drowning in the physicality, like the first level. It's not just floating above the water. I didn't say this before, but that's like the second level. The second sane, normal way of life level is that you're floating, but then you also know that if you're going to drown, you have the vow to save you from the drowning. But try and float most of the time. But then there's this way of flying. Flying is the third level. The third level, which is what the Rebbe says we should really aspire to, is not just saying I'm going to live a normal, sane life, which is then you're also very suspicious of the physical world. You're just counting on yourself. You're not counting on your vows. You don't need vows to save you. You can save yourself. But in the third level, you don't need saving, because the whole object of your soul coming into this world is to clarify and rectify the physical world. This is what Chabad likes very much, which is Nit'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu liot lo dira b'tachtonim. Hashem, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, has a desire to rectify the physical world and make the physical world a dwelling place for the divine light. He wants to come here and dwell among us. And that means that we have to very much deal with all the things that are permissible to us, all the different places and people and things and emotions and thoughts and ideas that are not strictly Torah, because that's already God's dwelling place, and that's not what's asur and impure, which is not to be, it's not up to us to rectify. That's for the Mashiach to rectify. So everything that's in between, that's what you're here for. You're here in order to come into hobbies and music and philosophy and traveling and dreaming, all kinds of things, literature, all the things that are in the permissible realm, that it's unclear what you have to do with it, is when you're coming from the third level, you're not even thinking about taking a vow, or instead of taking a vow, I should just trust myself. Because both these mindsets, both these approaches of the first two levels, they have to do with this level of what's mutar, has nothing really to do with my avodat Hashem, with serving God. It's just, it exists there. And the question is, in the first level, I'm terrified by it. In the second level, I'm not terrified by it. I'm just careful with it. But in the third level, it's not terrifying. And it's not just something which I have to be careful about. It's something which I have to go into and try and rectify and clarify and find the holy sparks within it. And try and connect the dots and see how God is also present in this level. And that's what most people are in the world are doing all the time. Most people in the world are, what interests them really, it's not the asur things. Many of them do, of course, but many of them, they care about the mutar things. And if you want to have an interesting conversation with them, and you want to elevate their life, which is also your own life, because you're also attracted to the same thing, you need to find a connection between all these things that exist in the world, in music and science and whatever, everything that's mutar, and find the divine spark. This is connecting to the Torah in this way, and the Torah makes us understand this in a better and higher way, or this helps us understand something in the Torah. There are all kinds of ways to elevate. Much of Hasidus is about elevating stories, elevating music, elevating humor, elevating, all kinds of things that are in the realm of the mutar, of the permissible. Now, this image of drowning, floating, or flying has to do with now connecting it to the terms we introduced before, hafara and hatara. This makes it very, very beautiful, this whole structure. We have three levels, right? The level of drowning, and that's the level of vows. Because if you're drowning, you need a vow. If you feel that you're pulled by the physical world very much, you need a vow to save you, to help you. And then the second level, you're floating. You don't need a vow. But you remember that, but you know that in case you're going to fall, then the vow will help you, right? Again, vow is here not an actual vow necessarily. A vow is taking an extreme measure of distancing myself from something physical or material or this worldly. So on the first level, I really need them. On the second level, I don't need them. I know that I have them in case I drown, but I'm floating now. But in the third level, I don't even think about it. It doesn't even start taking a vow. It's the very opposite of taking a vow. It's the opposite of the first level. Third level is exactly the opposite. Why? Taking a vow? Am I crazy to take a vow? The Torah has made it very clear what's asur. And now I'm not taking any vows. Everything that's permissible, I have to go in there and find the divine spark and work with this. And also it will help me, getting souls to work with this. And this is bechol drachecha tehu, know God in all your ways, in all your things. In everything you do, you can serve God. You can serve God when you're studying Torah. You can serve God when you're walking in the street or in nature or looking at a tree or looking at a painting. If you're conscious of trying to look at the world through Torah eyes, through faithful eyes, then you're living the third level of bechol, know God in every way, and I'm not even trying to disavow anything or to take a vow of distancing. I'm not afraid of the world also. I'm totally not afraid of anything. So again, connecting this to the terms we introduced, which are hafara and hatara, right? Hafara is the father figure breaking the vow of the child. And then hatara is untying it retroactively as if it never happened. So this is, when we have three levels, we need two, let's say, ladders, two, flights of stairs, or two ways of getting up, moving from one level up to the other level. And this is beautiful. To move from the lowest level to the second level, from the level of drowning and needing vows to the level of floating and not needing vows, this is called hafara, the first kind of nullification. The father figure to the child saying, you don't need that vow. My daughter, my son, you don't need that vow. So this is really within yourself. The child within you is afraid of the physical world and needs to take on vows, right? He needs to say, oh no, I may go back to where I was before and I'm so afraid. I don't want to go back to that place that I was a year ago, 10 years ago. I need to make this very strong decision that I'm not touching and not going anywhere near whatever that is. And then the more mature part of you, you need to build that mature part if you don't have it. But if you do build that mature, the father figure within you, that's the second sane, normal, Maimonides, classical Maimonides level, which is the father figure within you that says, well, yes, when I'm going back to being a child, I need this, but I'm not a child. And I'm enough years into my tshuva, or I've rectified myself enough that I can, for me, I grew up in Tel Aviv, which is very, very secular. And then I went to Yerushalayim and I started doing tshuva at some point. And then the first level of drowning or trying not to drown is I was absolutely terrified of going back to Tel Aviv. Just actually being in Tel Aviv and walking in the streets would remind me of my previous life, so to speak. And I had to take a kind of vow. The vow was, I'm not going to Tel Aviv. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to avoid it as much as I can. But then at some point, I was enough years into my tshuva, and then I had this father figure which could break the vow of the child. The child was the early years tshuva me, which made a vow, I'm not going into Tel Aviv. But then as the years went by, I had this father who could break the vow of the child. He says, you made this vow. I understand you. You need that vow. But now I'm here also. I'm the father figure. I'm the adult. And I'm enough years in my tshuva. I'm confident enough. I can go back to Tel Aviv, and it's not going to hurt me. I'm floating. I'm not drowning. I'm floating above everything, this worldly things, and I can go there. And it worked. I went back to going to Tel Aviv, and lo and behold, I didn't become a secular the moment I came in there, like I was afraid that I was going to be before, right? Because I had the father to break the vow of the child within me. So breaking the vow, hafarat nedarim, is like going from the first level to the second level. But then we want to go to the third level. That's really where we want to be. We want to be not just, I'm not afraid of X, Y, Z, earthly things that are going to hurt, damage my sanctity, my holiness, my kedusha way of life. I want to be so free of it, that I can actually, going back to enjoy it in a way. I'm not going to enjoy it in the old kind of way, because I'm not there anymore. I am connected to my neshama, to my soul, to the Torah, to God. And now I can just enjoy it. I can see the holy spark of it. I can go back and meet my friends from Tel Aviv, and we can have a nice conversation, and I'm even going to learn something from them, and I can also teach them something. It's not just that I'm not going to be damaged, I'm actually going to something really good is going to come out of going back to Tel Aviv. That's the third level. And this is hatara. This is untying the vow as if it never happened. And the reason Chazal said about this hatara thing, that it's flying in the air, that it's completely unfounded in the Torah, says the Rebbe, is because it has to do with your neshama, which is flying above the world. It's not afraid of the world at all. It's not confused about the world. It knows very much what's real and what isn't, what's high and what's low, what's holy and what isn't. And it's so connected to itself and to Hashem that it can go back to the world and know God in all of your ways, in everything. Both the chayav, what you have to do, which is holy, and the secular. The secular is a lot of holy sparks also. You can enjoy it. So very, very beautiful structure. So again, we have the first level, which is, and they're all real, right? The Torah gives room to all of them. This is very important. We can't start off at the third level. We can't start off. The Torah starts by telling us sometimes, some situations, you need vows. And then, but try and use that vow in order to become strong, so that you're a mature human being, and then you're walking on the second level. And then Chassidut comes. It's hinted at by the Maimonides. He says this, but the Chassidut says this is the thing. It is the third level of trying to be very much at ease with the world and trying to see everything is coming from Hashem, and not coming from the world from a terrified kind of place, or even from a sane, normal way, which the main merit of the second level is that it's not the first level, that you're not terrified. But we want not to be just not terrified, we want to be, to be joyful about it. We want to come to the world in a very positive way. We want to elevate the world, not just not drown. That's not an ideal to aspire to, just not drowning. Floating is a very sad kind of mode of being. We want to fly. We want to fly, and then when you're flying, also there's these birds that every once in a while they go down and they pick a fish and they go back up. When you're flying, you can also go into the water sometimes, and you can take whatever you want, go back up. That's like taking the sparks. So another thing to add to this, which really helps also, is everyone who studied a little bit of Chabad knows that there's an animal soul and a divine soul, right? And if you study a little bit more of Chabad, you know there's another soul in between, and that's called the intellectual soul. There's the animal soul, the intellectual soul, and the divine soul. And they correspond to the three levels, and it also really helps. Which part of me is in the danger of drowning? Of course, it's my animal soul. And it knows that it's very much tempted by earthly, mundane things. And that's the part of me, of all of us, that needs vows. And that's why the Torah put the thing called the vow in the Torah. That's why it's there. That's why Hashem put it there. Because when our animal soul becomes strong, we need to take strong measures against it. Okay. So the animal soul needs vows, again, quote unquote, in the wide sense of the term, which is taking extreme measures to make sure we don't fall, we don't drown, but we feel that we may drown. That's the right. So the animal soul needs vows, and then the level that floats, that's the intellectual soul. That's what the intellect does. It's rational, it's thinking, it's critical, it's that's the father figure in comparison to the child. The child is more like the animal soul, and the father is more like the intellectual soul. And then the father is the part that floats, and then that's the intellectual soul. And it says there's room for vows. I'm not untying them. I'm not saying they never happened. I think they happen, and there's room for them. But let's try not to fall. And if we fall, use the vow to lift you up. And then when you don't need it, I'm going to break your vow for you. And then you'll float with me. That's what the intellectual soul offers the animal soul. If you drown, the vow can save you. But God willing, I'll help you float with me. We'll float together, and we'll be floaters. We'll float through life until this life is over. We'll float, and we won't drown. But then comes the divine soul. And being connected to a divine soul is aspiring to a kind of way of looking at the world, which is looking at the world from a very high perspective, which says, of course, all spiritual things are wonderful and holy, but physical things are just as equally important. You know, there's this whole debate between Shammai and Hillel. Shammai says the heaven were created before the earth, and Hillel says the earth was created before the heavens. And then there's the third opinion that says they were created together. And the Hasidic approach is they're all true. Sometimes heaven is more important than earth. Sometimes earth is more important than heaven. That's Hillel's way of looking at the world. And so what this highest level has, it's in a way, it's more compassionate. It has more of a good eye regarding the physicality. Because the second level just says physicality is dangerous, but we have the ability to float. We're not going to drown. We can trust ourselves to float. But that's not a compassionate, positive, holy, Hasidic, deeply faithful look at the physical world. To have that kind of approach, it's not just floating. We need to fly and be really free. That's when you're really free of the physical world, is when you're not afraid of it anymore, and you can really enjoy it. I'll tell you a short story that a few years ago my father passed away, and the Rabbi Ginzburg came to console us in the Shiva, in the 7 days of Shiva. Now my father used to travel around the world, and he was very famous for traveling all over the world, and he has a book with all the stories of his journeys, and it was published. And my father picked it up, and so my father, the Rav Ginzburg, picked it up and started sort of browsing through this. And then at some point I remembered that he's going to reach a page with a very, very immodest picture. The picture is of my father in Africa with this African woman dressed in traditional African clothes. Let's put it this way, right? And very immodest. And it was a big picture, and I didn't remember this when he picked up the book, but as he was going through the page, I said, oh no, in a few moments, he's going to get to that page, and maybe I should tell him, maybe I should warn him, maybe I should just flip the pages. And then what happened was, I really strongly remember this. Instead of going through the book, and then he flipped the page, and the page was there, and he looked at it just as he looked at all the other pages. It was just the same amount of time, sort of like a second and a half, or 2 seconds, and then went into the next page. And you couldn't feel anything. You couldn't see anything. He didn't cringe. He didn't go squint. He didn't close the book or shut it down. It was just, it's there. I'm not. And the thing about this was so strong for me. This was for me an illustration of the kind of flying mode. And again, and the other, which I told you about, is going back to Tel Aviv, not just not being afraid of Tel Aviv, being able to float or survive. I survived Tel Aviv. I went to Tel Aviv and I survived. I came back and I'm still doing tshuva. I'm still dati. But then the third part of my evolution with Tel Aviv was that I went there to meet my old friends, and have a Torah class and teach them and have this very interesting dialogue with them, which benefited really both of us, because I could get something from them which I distance myself from, and they of course could get a lot of Torah from this. And this is also flying. And so this is right. These are the three levels of trying to look at the physical world, and there's really room for all of them. You can also say it's also a little bit of submission, separation, sweetening, of course, right? It goes together with all structures like this, that the animal soul needs a lot of submission, and then that's why the Torah gives it the thing called vows. You need a vow. You need sometimes a lot of achna'ah, a lot of submission, because you know yourself, and you know that you're tempted by something, so stay away from it. And then Havdalah, the separation, is the floating level, the level of Kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lecha, sanctify yourself with what's permissible to you, right? It's permissible, but try and live a holy life with the permissible, and you don't need any vows for this. And this is Havdalah, you're separating yourself, your intellectual soul from your animal soul, and yourself from surroundings, and you're not drowning. You're floating is like separation. You're separated from the water. You're not drowning in the water. You're separated, and you're able to look at it and think about it and try and see what's kosher, what's not kosher, what's in the realms of the reasonable, what isn't in the realm of the reasonable. And then sweetening, of course, is the level of the divine soul, the level of flying, the level of looking at this world and enjoying it and seeing the beauty of it and seeing the humor of it. And then it also means being more compassionate to all the drowners. That's maybe one last point to add. There's something very beautiful. There's biologically and also in the Torah, there's a deep connection between fish and birds. They're very different from, ground, dry land animals. There's something very similar about them. And in a way, you can say that flying is a bit like swimming, and swimming is a bit like flying. And of course, they were created on this day. Fish and fowl were created on the fifth day, as opposed to the land animals that were created on the sixth day. And also, the way evolution thinks about it is that there were fish, and then there were birds, and only then you had the middle level, which is the land animals. So there's something about flying which looks at the people drowning. Who are the people drowning? It's what the Torah called the reshaim, right? It's people who are doing sins, who are drowning in the physicality, right? In the teva. Teva is nature, and also has to do with litboa, same root, same word. Tava, teva, you're drowning in nature. And when you're thinking about yourself in those terms, and you're taking the vows, you're not like them. And also when on the second level, you don't want to be like them also. But you're more strength to do this. But when you're flying, you suddenly look at the people drowning, which are the sinners, the people really, in physicality. You'll see them as kind of fish, which is very similar to birds. You see them as holy souls, which are looking for holy sparks. They just don't know. They haven't evolved from fish to fowl yet. But they will. They could be, because that's what they're looking for. You're looking at them. You're not afraid of being one, because you're free of this. When you're drowning yourself, you're very much afraid of being a drowner, because you feel that you're drowning yourself, and you know that it's bad. And when you're floating, you also have a kind of fear of drowning, but you're able to trust yourself because you're more in control. But you don't enjoy and benefit and learn something and able to communicate in a good, positive, happy way, joyful way with all the people drowning, because you're still a little bit afraid of being like them. But in the third level, when you're really free and you're like a bird, then you can become a friend to the fish, and you can be with them, and it's fun and it's nice, and there's a similarity between the fish and the birds, and then maybe they could become birds also, and maybe you can learn from the fish how to be even a better bird, because a bird sees God everywhere, right? When you're flying, you see God in physicality just as much as you see God in spirituality. It's all made by God. That's like the Hillel and Shammai arguing which came first, and us saying they're all they're all good. They're all from Hashem, both spirituality and physicality. So that's our lesson for this week from Parashat Matot. And two announcements before I open the mics. One announcement is that next week there's not going to be a shiur because I'm moving. I'm moving my part. I'm moving my life. We're moving from Jerusalem to Ra'anana. Major weird change in my life, so I'm not going to be sure. And second, not really an announcement. It's sort of like maybe like letting you know about something, which is that you know that this all these shiurim are free, which is wonderful, but it's also a little bit hard, and it's also very helpful to get support. So I wanted to tell you that there's this platform that I'm using that's called Patreon, and Patreon is a kind of crowdfunding platform, but it's not limited to time. It's over time for, there's regular teachings or classes like every week, and it's what we call Horat Keva. It's like a certain amount that you give every month, and there's all kinds of levels. So I'm going to put in a second, I'm going to put the link to Patreon, and you can go there and look at the video and see if you maybe want to give some support for these weekly classes. And anyway, it's going to still be free, but it's also to really helps if you become a supporter on Patreon. The idea is like being a patron, like in the old times, right? In the Renaissance, there was a patron to the arts, but here it's a lot of people being patrons for each other for whatever they do, art or Torah or whatever it is. So that's it. Now I'm going to stop the video and we'll open the mics.